Hi, I warmly welcome you. Infiniti is a brand that appeared on the European market to do things differently than the Germans. However, a few years later, it disappeared. That was a controversial decision. I remember because this car had everything it needed. Good engines, a look that basically hasn't aged even after years, and a premium interior. What actually happened there? We'll talk about that today with Patrick. QX50, let's begin.
Hi, my name is Patrick, I'm from Lublin, and I thought I'd show you my Infiniti QX50 today, just like Zach, our OFF. I'm curious why this brand vanished from the European market. I don't know, since when I was searching for a car, it seemed like a really interesting choice. I had this fantasy that I wanted this car to evoke some emotions while driving. I wanted it to be fast. That was a whim, and besides that, more understandably, the most important thing for me was that it would be reliable. And actually, also considering the budget I had, which was several tens of thousands of zlotys, Infiniti was one of the few such options. And also taking into account my lifestyle and how I use the car, meaning that I live in the city, I don't drive it every day, but when I do, it's often short trips. And I would like it to have a naturally aspirated engine. There's actually not much left to choose from. First, I got interested in the Q50 model, which I think is beautiful, but unfortunately it practically doesn't have a trunk. And then I got interested in the QX50. The QX50 used to be called something else. I think it changed its name in 2013. Before that, it was the EX37, and there was also a very similar car, the EX35. The 35 was produced from 2005 and the 37 from 2008. They later changed the name and gave it a facelift. Exactly in those years, 2012, 2013, 2014, I remember it well. And in 2015, they extended the chassis by 800 millimeters, and this car is from 2016. Production is ending since the second generation has been out since 2018. So this one is the facelifted version. With the longer chassis, it has LED daytime running lights, and it also differs from the pre-facelift version in the way the air flows at the bottom. I've had this car for over 2 years, and I've driven several thousand kilometers. We don't rack up huge mileage. And because of that, I don't really worry about high fuel consumption. And at the same time, I do worry about high fuel consumption, and I do care. Although you can install liquefied petroleum gas because the engine has indirect injection, so there's no problem with that. I bought the car with over 90,000 kilometers on it. Now it naturally has just under 110,000. And the odometer is in miles because the car was imported from the States. In Europe, it's really hard to find an Infiniti, especially a QX50. I think I've only seen another QX50 on the road once in my life. So it's quite an original car. I didn't necessarily care about standing out. Besides, this car might be original for someone who's a bit interested in cars. Because for someone who doesn't know much, it just looks like some weird Mazda and doesn't really stand out. From what I've read, Infiniti in general from 2008 to 2019 sold only 60,000 units of all models in total. In Europe, I don't know how many QX50S they sold, but probably not many. All the ones I looked at were imported from the States. The engine is installed in many Nissans and Infinitis with a capacity of 3.7 liters. The naturally aspirated V6 designated VQ37 VHR, known for its reliability from popular models, is installed in the Z cars, meaning the Nissan 370Z. And there, people often modify it in some way. Of course, it's a naturally aspirated engine, so you can't do much with just tuning. But once you add forced induction, people get up to 500 horsepower, and then you need to add forged connecting rods to get even more power. And I've heard some legends that in these Nissans, they even reach up to 1,000 horsepower, but of course, I haven't done any modifications here. This is a family car with a bit of an edge, not something for professional racing. There are 24 valves, an aluminum head, and aluminum blocks. The design is trouble-free, and I haven't had any issues with it, at least when it comes to the engine, from the things people usually complain about in this car. As for the radiator, it usually wears out in about 6 to 10 years, but here it's more like 6 or 7 years, and I've already replaced the radiator. The cost of such a radiator is about 1,000 Polish zloty, and that's pretty much it. You could possibly complain about the brakes wearing out quickly because the car weighs just under 2 tons, 1,900 kilograms, a bit less, and it's an automatic. There were no manual options. But the cost of brake pads on both axles is around 150 Polish zloty, and if I remember correctly, the discs are about 400, 500 Polish zloty each.
My dear friends, the partner of this episode is AUTODNA, the simplest and cheapest way to check a car's history before buying and avoid mistakes for just a few bucks. You can check if the car is listed in international databases as stolen, if there are no recorded discrepancies in the mileage, or any history of serious damage. Just like in the sample image attached, these are photos from the AUTODNA report that you want to see before making a purchase decision, because in the ad you'll see this. 40% of drivers had to repair faults after purchase that resulted from the car's accident history, which they didn't know about before buying. In the video description, you'll find a link to AUTODNA. I warmly invite you to check it out, and let's not buy a pig in a poke.
And I haven't mentioned the performance of this engine yet, somehow, which is something that's quite interesting for everyone. This is an engine that revs high, which is enjoyable, up to 7,500 revolutions per minute. At 7,200 revolutions per minute, we have full power, which is 325 horsepower, although that also depends on the tuning. And there are also different versions of this QX50. Even when you search by vehicle identification number, it can show different power versions. But let's say it's 325 horsepower at 5,200 revolutions per minute, the torque is 360
horsepower, 325 horsepower, 325 horsepower, 325 horsepower.
325 horsepower, 325 horsepower. And if we look closely at how it sits, it's behind the front axle, kind of pushed toward the cabin. This is a feature of the platform on which this car is built, the front midship platform, I believe, which is shared with the Infiniti G37. This arrangement gives the car almost perfect weight distribution, 50-50 on the axles, so it handles really well. And the engine is paired with an automatic transmission. As I mentioned, the transmission is from the Japanese company Yatco, which is probably not a very well-known design. Actually, I haven't managed to read anything bad about it. Only good things. The only interesting thing, which is actually quite normal, is that the manufacturer says it's a maintenance-free transmission, but it's still worth changing the oil in it every several tens of thousands of kilometers. The transmission is a 7-speed adaptive one, so it learns a bit how we use it. And you can feel that the revs change. When the driver changes and drives for a while, or when you use the manual mode, this transmission does have a manual mode, but the QX50 was never equipped with paddle shifters, so you have to change gears with the lever. Yes, I admitted here earlier to Zakar, or maybe even to you, that there are sometimes problems with parts, especially body parts, when it comes to mechanical parts. For example, I waited a short time for the brake calipers I replaced, but it turned out in the end that we installed calipers from the Q50, not the QX50, which we thought would fit. It turned out that they were missing some kind of hole, which was simply drilled in. So there are adventures like that. But it was sorted out within 2 days, right? So it wasn't a problem. You don't have to wait for brake discs either. They're available in wholesalers, brake pads too, although there's not a big selection when it comes to that. But those body parts I mentioned, unfortunately, I know from my own experience, but luckily I had comprehensive insurance, because once during a snowstorm I managed to hit a wall and damage the bumper and the headlight. And back then, not every body shop even wanted to take it on. And for 2 weeks it just sat there somewhere. Negotiations with the insurance company went on, then it took another week. And finally the car returned to Poznan, where I bought it. Where is the Infiniti Park Poznan workshop? Adrian Mikelski, whom I greet if he's watching. This guy knows exactly where to order everything and how to do it. They only work on Infiniti cars. So my car had to go there on a tow truck, and I waited about 2 months for those parts to arrive by ship. So you have to wait a while. It's worth avoiding collisions. Yeah, a powerful engine should have more than just front-wheel drive, and it does. It's all-wheel drive, 4x4. And this is Nissan's solution, where by default all the power goes to the rear, so the car has a rear-wheel drive character, but when needed, the electronics engage the front, and then the power distribution goes from, again, 100% to the rear, up to 50-50. So those are the drive options. The limited slip differential is only electronic. There are no torsons or anything like that here. However, the wheels are braked individually, for example, after a skid in corners and so on. Actually, there was one known issue with this engine, because I said it's completely reliable, but there was a fault. At the beginning of production, that is before 2012 or 2013, you had to check the engine number when buying such a car to see if it had undergone the service action. Because the failure was quite serious, it involved a sudden leak from the oil channel gasket, and it could end tragically for this engine. Since 2014, when buying this engine, we are safe. The defect was fixed by installing metal gaskets. The interior is designed, you could say, in a truly luxurious way, especially since there are also these optional wood inserts here, supposedly made of maple. I think everything fits together. Zaka will check soon. Operating this console is easy with both physical buttons and a touch screen, however, it's clear the screen is outdated. There's a Bluetooth system here, and in these model years it was standard to make phone calls via Bluetooth, but connecting audio was not standard. You had to buy that as a package, and that package is here, because generally this car is equipped with probably everything that could have been in it. But this Bluetooth doesn't work that great. I mean, if one person uses it, and preferably all the time, then it's okay. But it can also, for example, only turn on after about 2 minutes of driving. There's a button for the camera, for the 360 camera system, which is a huge help when it comes to parking. In the middle we have this analog clock, a nice touch, a classic. The sound system here is by Bose. There's also a subwoofer in the back, and it sounds pretty good to me. We also control the air conditioning with physical buttons. An interesting fact is that there was a collaboration with Sharp here, and it's present here. Apparently the car has a pollution sensor and an automatic system for turning on air recirculation inside the vehicle with purification and ionization, which is supposed to create a wonderful atmosphere. Yes, that was sold here. At the front there are some quite characteristic cuts for the QX50, which are actually a bit puzzling as to what they're supposed to symbolize. People associate it with different things. Well, yes, but there's a glove compartment, and in general storage compartments in this car, it's kind of like that. You could say that's its flaw. There's very little space in this glove compartment, but it does sink in slowly. It's softly lined, so that's a plus. There are no storage compartments in the seats, no drawers in the doors. The little compartments are funny. No bottle will fit in there at all. Maybe just a brush or some tissues at most. Here we have 2 cup holders, and there's a little flap here, so you can also fit something bigger. For example, a 1.5 liter bottle will fit in here too. And here is a storage compartment, not a huge one, but it's there. And inside it there's a charging socket. Here's a small compartment that's a bit amusing, but you can store something inside. I once struggled to remove something from it. I keep my gate remote here. It fits perfectly in this compartment, and here is a second charging socket.
The first thing Patrick said when he saw me getting out of my car was, "Ha, you in that car, there's no way you'll fit, no chance." So I get in here already assuming it's going to be bad, and it is bad when it comes to the seat height adjustment, because really my first instinct is to get in here and press the button down, but it doesn't go any lower. It's already in the lowest position, so in that regard it's really not great. Because I actually watch the road basically over the mirror, which is funny because this is from the time when there weren't a million cameras and radars behind the mirror, so it just hung there on the windshield. And above the mirror there's a space where you can just see the windshield, so I see everything happening in front of the car, but above the mirror instead of below it. It's actually interesting. Anyway, up to the headliner. Surprisingly, I'm still 0.5 centimeter short of it, so I don't have to slouch yet. And basically I fit here in terms of height. Even though I'm in completely the wrong position relative to the front windshield, still, technically speaking, everything is okay. You could even make it a bit more upright. Still not yet. Now I don't fit anymore. Let's unscrew it. Okay, yes, we need to use electrically adjustable steering wheels. And I make it too high, but I make it, and now, yes, what else was I supposed to do? I was supposed to pull on the plastics and handles, so generally this is a premium interior from, let's say, 10 years ago in terms of release year, but probably from 15 years ago in terms of when it was planned. That's probably why there's this maple wood or something else. So what did it look like 15 years ago? The armrest on the right is one of those weird armrests that sinks in really deep, but there's concrete underneath, so it feels deep and soft, but your elbow quickly hits the hard part and it ends up being the same. Here it is from a distance. When I looked at it, I thought my whole arm would just sink into this soft part, but actually the hard material barely bends under my finger, and there's this vertical stitching. You'd think they really sink, so to speak, into the soft leather, but it's not that. It's just some kind of cut in barely soft material. Here, all around, listen, it's hard in the middle. The doors too, I'd say it's a millimeter of material. So honestly, that's not much for a car with big ambitions. The only explanation for why it's not more luxurious is that it simply comes from a different market than the European one. That's all I'll say for now. Now, the second part of the 2-meter guy test. And surprisingly, there's no problem here, or maybe not at all. Surprisingly, because it was said that during the lifetime of this model, the platform was extended. These 8 centimeters here clearly make a difference. What's more, I'm afraid to think about what it was like here before it was extended, because I actually fit here now. But there's maybe 2 centimeters of space left, so -8. I wouldn't have had the slightest chance. There's enough space above my head too, actually. I don't have as much headroom as the driver, but this is a compact SUV crossover that still gives you quite a lot of space inside. I'll show you one gadget that means this is the absolute top version, and that's this little hanger behind the driver's seat headrest. As you can see, that means this car is fully loaded. It's a shame that even the fully loaded version doesn't have door pockets.
In the back we have the trunk. On one hand, that's what made me choose this model instead of the Q50, but on the other hand, it's also something I actually see as a drawback of this car, because you would think it would be bigger, but it's not. And the trunk lid isn't electric, you have to lift it by hand, and actually there were no electric trunk lids available here at all. In the QX50, the trunk has about 340 liters, and well, unlike the sedan, we can pack all the way up to the roof. Plus, in this trunk, we have a spare wheel under the floor. There's a little hook here. Well, with this hook, you can hook it here or here. I'm not sure. Oh, it's open. There's a subwoofer in the wheel here, and you can unplug the subwoofer, take out the wheel, and then you can fit a pretty big bag with your stuff in here. But I haven't had to do that yet. Let's say, in my case, since up until now our family was 2 + 1, now it's going to be 2 + 2, and I'm wondering, we probably won't fit. We'll have to use those roof rails and probably add a box on top. Going back to the button we saw under the driver's right hand, it was only for raising the rear seat, and here we already have buttons for folding it. If we press here, part of the seat will fold down. It's split 2/3, 1/3. And now we can carry a Christmas tree or whatever else we want. There's more space here, and the seats fold almost flat. It's okay, and once we've transported something, we can raise it electrically. There's that kind of luxury here.
Well, amazing. I'd rather have an electric tailgate. Me too. And going back to the question we basically asked at the very beginning, what actually happened here? But what, that it doesn't have a turbo?
It doesn't have one. I know it doesn't, but it drives nicely. Yeah, it drives like this.
As if it had 100 more horsepower or weighed a ton less.
If he pushes it in the car, I downshift. Not anymore, it's already too late.
But the very fact that it can go up to 7,000 revolutions per minute, as you say, gives it a lot of potential. Okay, when you were looking for a car
that has something special,
after the first 500 meters, I can already see that it's not boring. You might think, where's the turbo, where's the supercharger? But it turns out that naturally aspirated is completely enough. But going back, we can ask the question, what was actually missing? Because as you can see, there's no lack of power and there's no lack of driving pleasure either.
The fuel consumption here is supposed to be around 11.5 liters on average. The computer shows 12, but that's not true. It's actually more like 15.
It basically reacts so spontaneously to even the slightest press of the gas pedal that you'd have to be a really disciplined person to get it down to 10 liters on a longer trip. No way.
It accelerates nicely, under 6 seconds to 100. And there's no launch control or anything, you just press the gas and go.
We can do a gentle start from a standstill and check on PP4. We've got wet asphalt, we've got plenty of nights. need to be careful since this is a delicate moment. It went just perfectly, exactly as I expected on the asphalt. And like I said, because of the engine's specific characteristics, it wasn't a strong jolt, it was a smooth, decisive takeoff, just a takeoff. Actually, it's missing some way to handle it well, it's missing that.
You can turn it off, no problem. There's only an acoustic lane departure warning there.
No?
No, if you turn it on, it will start jerking. On the left, you can press a button so it won't beep if the child is sleeping on a country road. The ground clearance in this car is small. It's more like a sedan than an SUV. It used to be even smaller, just 15 centimeters at first. And I think with the facelift they raised it, and now it's 16.5, so they didn't raise it much, and I think it's 17. If there's a rear-wheel drive version, I think it's a little bit higher. Well, either way, it's not really an off-roader, so clearly this is a car that's tuned more like a swollen sedan.
For enjoying driving, still more on asphalt than off-road. I'm not surprised, by the way, considering the engine curiosities.
So the engine has a 3.7 litre capacity, but you only pour in 4.9 litres of oil. So that's not much overall, and often it's modified. I know that in Z cars it was usually done. Well, because here you add an oil cooler and pour in a bit more oil so it heats up more slowly, let's say, and doesn't overheat as easily.
But the good news is that on short trips you instantly have a warm engine.
Yes, it heats up very quickly.
How much does it cost? Because you mentioned off camera at one point that you considered a Lexus, but the Lexus was out of the buyer's budget.
Actually, that's another advantage because they're inexpensive. For a car that offers so much, I think it's really a cheap option. And to be specific, I bought it over 2 years ago for 70,000, and I checked Automoto yesterday. So it's the same year and similar mileage for 68. So apparently it's not losing value, but there's also one listed for 45. It probably depends on the condition and so on. But it's not a lot, and we're talking about this kind of mileage, 100,000 less than 10 years old. The only thing that might put off someone with a tight budget is probably the fuel consumption, but you can always add a liquefied petroleum gas system. If I drove 20,000 a year, I'd already have liquefied petroleum gas installed. It definitely wouldn't be my style, but my mileage is low, so I stick with gasoline. There's no air suspension here, no adaptations of any kind. Yes, there are double wishbones in the front and a multi-link setup in the back. I haven't had any issues with that yet, and I'm keeping my fingers crossed that it stays that way for a long time.
And here I go back in my thoughts to what happened, that Infiniti never really caught on because Infiniti was created as the more premium brand, Nissan for the United States. You're saying there's no adaptation, like with the suspension. And if you look at, for example, all the comparable German brands where you have a similar range of engine power, then you definitely have gadgets like adjustments for stiffness, suspension, yes.
Not enough premium features?
And here it's very American, like a lot of power, quarter mile and straight ahead, kind of like that. And not really adapted to have more of a sporty feel. There's not even a sport mode in the gearbox. 50. Yeah, just as I thought. It also turned out very blurry and unclear because after turning the wheels, the tire actually kept sliding straight ahead and only reacted with a delay when changing direction. As a result, we were actually driving. I'll try to hold it a bit longer. So here we have 50. And now it wanted to go properly. I held it a bit longer, the tire had time to react, it bounced to the left and went. Only now did the system start to react, and you can see there was some jerking of the wheels on the right side. To sum up Wash's approach, you can see that this is not a car. The light tires, as you know, had trouble on the wet asphalt, but once they reacted, the car, aware that it's not light, didn't wait to see what would happen, it just braked us. And basically we finished the maneuver at around 40 km/h. Thank you for presenting the car. Thanks, it was nice to take a ride and go back in my thoughts again. Yes, actually back to the times when Infiniti was in Poland. It's a pity it's not here anymore because it was always another premium brand to choose from. I was really intrigued by what you said at the very beginning of this video, that you were looking for a car that has features typical for all premium crossovers, and you said that ultimately it's only Infiniti. That not any Audi, not any BMW, not any Mercedes.
The more powerful engines are usually turbocharged, but for some reason I insisted it must be naturally aspirated.
That's all.
That narrowed it down, and
That basically ruled everyone out.
I was thinking, for example, about the 3.0 turbo fuel stratified injection, but it's got a turbo. I don't know, I just want peace of mind when I want to go out for some bread rolls.
I understand, so you can come back with the bread rolls. Well, in that case, I wish you the same trouble-free experience, so you always come back with the bread rolls without any surprises. Thank you again for showing us the car. Thank you all for watching this episode as well. Remember to subscribe and see you in the next videos. Bye.